A deafening roar shattered the morning silence. An enormous shadow burst from the forest, moving with incredible speed. 300 pounds of muscle and fury charged directly toward the river where carefree young women were splashing. "Bear!" A piercing scream echoed across the water. Panic seized everyone. Some rushed to shore, others froze in terror. And Emma was choking, helplessly floundering in the depths. A blow to her head against a rock had drained her last strength. When the bear leaped into the water, sending up fountains of spray, people on the shore cried out in desperation. No one could help. No one could stop the inevitable. The gigantic beast raced straight toward the drowning woman, covering the distance in seconds. In that moment, time seemed to stop. The entire world compressed to a single point, where human and beast met. Emma, gathering her final strength, raised her head above water and locked eyes with the bear. What happened next would forever change the lives of all witnesses. 6 years earlier, Emma Miller's life had been entirely different. Having just received her biology degree, she turned down a prestigious internship in New York City to work at a remote wildlife sanctuary in Montana. Her parents were shocked. Her friends thought she was crazy, but Emma knew. Her place was there, among wild nature. The Pine Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary greeted her inhospitably. Old cabins with wood-burning stoves, ice-cold well water, and virtually no connection to the outside world. And the staff, hardened men who had worked with wild animals for decades, looked at the fragile city girl with undisguised skepticism. "She won't last a month," they smirked behind her back. Those first weeks were a genuine trial. Emma woke with the first rays of sunlight, worked until dark, collapsed from exhaustion, and then it all began again the next morning. Feeding animals, cleaning enclosures, assisting the veterinarian. Endless reports. The sanctuary was nestled deep in Montana's wilderness, surrounded by towering pines and rugged mountains that seemed to touch the clouds. The nearest town, Riverdale, was over 40 miles away, a collection of rustic buildings, a general store, and a diner that served the best blueberry pancakes Emma had ever tasted. On her rare days off, she would drive her beat-up Jeep Cherokee along winding mountain roads just to taste a slice of normalcy. "You're different from the others who've come and gone," said Jackson, the grizzled head ranger who'd spent 30 years in these woods. "Got something in your eyes, determination maybe." Emma had simply smiled. What she couldn't explain was the inexplicable pull she felt toward this wild place, as if something was waiting for her here. But everything changed on one rainy morning when they brought in the bear cub. "Poachers," the ranger named Derek briefly stated, unloading a cage with a growling ball of brown fur. "Killed the mother. Cub got caught in a trap, barely alive, but mean as hell." The bear cub was emaciated, its left hind paw bleeding. The trap had left a deep, jagged wound. But even in this condition, it furiously lunged at the bars when anyone approached. Rain pounded on the metal roof of the medical cabin as Dr. Winters, the sanctuary's veterinarian, assessed the situation. The small room smelled of antiseptic and fear. The cub's fear, palpable and heart-wrenching. "We'll have to euthanize," sighed Dr. Winters after several unsuccessful attempts to examine the animal. "Too aggressive. We can't treat him." "Let me try," Emma suddenly said, surprising herself with her boldness. The men exchanged glances, a mixture of amusement and pity in their eyes. "Look, Miller," said Derek, "this isn't a puppy. This is a wild predator with a nasty disposition. Even at this size, he could take your face off. Just give me tonight," she pleaded. "One night. If I can't make progress, I won't argue." That evening, she didn't go home. She sat by the cage, quietly talking to the wounded animal. The cub growled, threw itself against the bars, then tired and retreated to a corner, warily watching this strange human female who wouldn't leave. Emma simply talked about herself about the sanctuary, about how beautiful the wilderness around them was. Her voice remained calm, her movements fluid. When darkness fell, she placed a bowl of food in front of the cage and left. In the morning, the bowl was empty. Thus began their story. Day after day, Emma came to the bear cub. At first, she just sat nearby, then started leaving food closer to herself. After a week, he was taking food from her hands, though still not allowing anyone else near. "Kodiak," she whispered one day when the cub first allowed her to touch his muzzle. "You're strong, like the great bears of Kodiak Island." The name stuck, though she often shortened it to Cody when they were alone. Months melded into seasons. Kodiak recovered, grew, strengthened. The wound on his paw healed, leaving a distinctive crescent-shaped scar. He was moved to a spacious enclosure where he could climb trees and swim in an artificial pond. Emma became everything to the bear: mother, friend, mentor. She taught him to find food, developed his natural instincts, and prepared him for life in the wild. In the evenings, she would simply sit beside him, sometimes leaning against his warm side, telling him about her dreams. "I always wanted to make a difference," she'd say, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in hues of orange and purple. "Everyone else in my family became lawyers or doctors. They saved people. I wanted to save something else." Kodiak would listen, his amber eyes fixed on her face, as if understanding every word. A special bond formed between them that was impossible to explain. The bear recognized her footsteps from hundreds of yards away, greeted her at the enclosure gate, and allowed her to give him injections and examine him, only her and no one else. "Never seen anything like it," the old ranger Jackson would shake his head, "like they're talking without words." The sanctuary staff grew accustomed to the strange friendship between the woman and the bear. Some even placed bets on when the animal would show its true nature. But Kodiak wasn't an ordinary bear. Intelligence shone in his eyes that might make some humans envious. He recognized himself in mirrors, understood dozens of commands, and displayed complex emotions. Winter came and went. Spring brought new life to the sanctuary, and summer's heat gave way to fall's golden splendor. Through it all, Emma and Kodiak's bond only deepened. She spent Christmas Eve in his enclosure, bringing him a special treat of fresh salmon and honey. While a blizzard raged outside, they huddled together in his den. Emma reading aloud from Jack London's Call of the Wild, while Kodiak listened, his massive head resting in her lap. "The others think I'm crazy," she told him, scratching behind his ears. "Maybe I am, but you understand, don't you?" His eyes, intelligent and warm, seemed to say he did. By the time Kodiak reached his second year, he had grown into a magnificent specimen, over 7 feet tall when standing, with a glossy brown coat that shimmered in the sunlight and muscles that rippled beneath his fur. Yet despite his imposing size, he remained gentle with Emma, playful even, like an overgrown puppy. "He's special," Emma would say to anyone who would listen. "Like a piece of my soul lives in him." News of the sanctuary's closure came suddenly. Economic recession, funding cuts, streamlining operations. Dry, bureaucratic terms hiding a tragedy for both people and animals. "We have 3 weeks to prepare the animals for release," announced Director Matthews at the general meeting. "Those that can't adapt will be distributed to zoos." Emma cried then for the first time in 2 years. The small conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Staff members avoided eye contact, some wiping away tears of their own. For many, Pine Ridge wasn't just a workplace, it was home. "What about Kodiak?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Director Matthews, a man who had dedicated 30 years to wildlife conservation, looked at her with genuine sympathy. "He's young and healthy. He'll have the best chance in the wild." That night, Emma sat alone on the porch of her cabin, staring at the stars through tear-blurred eyes. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and the distant howl of wolves. Everything she had built here was crumbling. "Cody is ready," she told Jackson the next day, swallowing her tears. "He'll manage." The final days they spent together. Emma stopped bringing food. The bear needed to learn to find it himself. She took him on a leash through the forest, showing him where to look for berries, roots, honey. Every moment was precious now, every second together a memory to be treasured. She documented everything in her journal, his behaviors, preferences, quirks, knowing these words would soon be all she had left of him. "You're going to be magnificent out there," she told him, watching him dig for grubs under a fallen log. "The king of these mountains." Then came the day of farewell. The morning dawned clear. Sunlight gilded the tops of the pines. A light breeze carried the scents of the wilderness. They stood at the forest's edge, the woman and the bear, now almost fully grown, powerful, with thick brown fur. "You have to go," Emma whispered, embracing him one last time. "You're free." Staff members watched from a respectful distance as Emma removed Kodiak's tracking collar, his last connection to human care. Her fingers trembled as she unbuckled the leather, letting it fall away. Kodiak looked at her with his intelligent eyes, as if trying to memorize every feature of her face. Then he slowly turned and walked toward the forest. At the edge of the clearing, he stopped and looked back. Their gazes met across the space that would now separate them. In that moment, Emma felt her heart physically breaking, a pain so intense it took her breath away. "I love you," she mouthed silently. Then he disappeared among the trees. Emma stood there long after he was gone, until Jackson gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, kid. Time to go." That night she packed her few belongings into her Jeep. As she drove away from Pine Ridge for the last time, she couldn't help looking back in the rearview mirror, hoping for one last glimpse of a brown shape among the trees. There was nothing but wilderness. Time heals even the deepest wounds. 5 years passed like a single day. Emma moved to Denver, found work at an environmental consulting firm. She made friends, got an apartment, settled into typical city life. But at night, she dreamed of the forest and of a huge bear disappearing into its depths. Her apartment was on the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise, as far from wilderness as one could get. The constant noise of traffic replaced the sound of wind through pine needles. Artificial lights drowned out the stars she once knew by name. She tried dating. David was kind and thoughtful, a lawyer with an interest in environmental policy. They went to restaurants, movies, even talked about moving in together. But something was missing. When he kissed her, she felt nothing. When he asked about her past, she gave vague answers about working at a wildlife sanctuary. How could she explain Kodiak? How could anyone understand what she had lost? "You still miss your pet?" her colleagues would ask, noticing how she froze when seeing bears on television. "He wasn't a pet," Emma would quietly reply. "He was a friend." She kept Kodiak's broken collar in a cedar box beside her bed. Sometimes, on particularly difficult nights, she would hold it close, breathing in the faint scent of pine and wilderness that still clung to the leather. That July weekend, she agreed to go camping with co-workers only because the location was near the former sanctuary. An irrational hope pierced her heart. What if? The group was lively. 6 women from the office, all eager to escape the city heat. They packed into 2 SUVs with enough supplies for a small army: tents, coolers, hiking gear, and cases of White Claw. "Emma's our wilderness expert," joked Sarah, a marketing executive who had never spent a night outdoors before this trip. "She'll protect us from bears and wolves. If only they knew." The riverbank was picturesque, a sandy spit, clear water, pine forest approaching almost to the water's edge. The women set up camp, built a fire, sang songs to guitar until late at night. Around the campfire, with stars overhead and the gentle sound of the river in the background, Emma felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time in years, she found herself talking about Pine Ridge. "I had this bear," she began hesitantly. "His name was Kodiak." The others listened, spellbound, as she shared fragments of her story, finding him injured, nursing him back to health, the bond they formed. She didn't tell them everything. Some memories were too precious to share. "What happened to him?" asked Lisa, her eyes wide in the firelight. Emma looked into the darkness beyond their circle of light. "He went back to the wild, where he belonged." In the morning, warmed by the heat, they went swimming. The water was cool and refreshing. The women splashed about, laughed, sprayed each other. Emma swam a little farther than the others, enjoying the solitude and quiet. That's when she heard branches cracking on the shore. She turned and froze. At the forest's edge stood an enormous brown bear. His fur glistened in the sunlight. Powerful paws slightly trembled, nostrils flared, drawing in air. Emma's heart stopped. Something about the bear's posture, the tilt of his head, seemed hauntingly familiar. But that was impossible. It couldn't be. "Bear!" screamed one of the women, spotting the animal. Panic seized everyone. The swimmers rushed to shore, jumping out of the water, grabbing belongings, running to the tents. Emma also tried to escape, but in her haste didn't notice an underwater rock. Her foot slipped, she lost her balance and went under. A blow to her head against a rock stunned her. Dark circles swam before her eyes. She desperately tried to surface, but her body wouldn't obey. Water filled her lungs. Consciousness began to fade. The world around her became distant, muffled, as if she were falling down a long tunnel. Her last coherent thought was of Kodiak, his amber eyes watching her as she walked away that final day. And in that moment, the incredible happened. The bear, which had stood motionless until then, suddenly sprang into action. He didn't chase the women on shore. He charged straight into the water toward the drowning Emma. "Oh my God, he's going to tear her apart," they screamed from the shore. Sarah grabbed her phone, trying to dial 911 with trembling fingers, while Lisa sobbed uncontrollably. "We have to help her," she cried, but no one moved. What could they do against a charging bear? But instead of attacking, the bear dove. Emma felt something huge and warm lift her from below, pushing her to the surface. Air rushed into her lungs. She coughed, spitting out water. The bear, carefully, as if handling a fragile doll, nudged her toward shore. When Emma could finally focus her gaze, she saw his face right next to hers. And at that moment, she noticed the scar, a distinctive crescent on his hind paw. Her heart skipped a beat. "Cody," she whispered, not believing her eyes. The bear stopped. Recognition registered in his gaze. 5 years dissolved in an instant. They were together again, the woman and her bear. Emma wept, wrapping her arms around his enormous head, whispering words of gratitude. He didn't move, allowing her this moment, as if understanding its importance. "I thought I'd never see you again," she sobbed, her fingers tangling in his thick fur. "I've missed you every single day." People on shore stood paralyzed, watching the incredible scene unfold. "What's happening?" whispered Sarah, her phone forgotten in her hand. "Why isn't he attacking her?" Lisa shook her head, speechless. "It's like they know each other." The bear supported Emma with his massive body as they moved through the water. Every movement was gentle, controlled, a striking contrast to his formidable size. When they reached shallow water, he stayed close, watching attentively as she regained her footing. When Emma finally climbed onto shore, the bear followed. He showed no aggression, simply stood beside her like a faithful guardian. She collapsed onto the sand, still coughing up water, and he lowered himself beside her, a protective wall of fur and muscle between her and the rest of the world. Her colleagues stood frozen in disbelief 20 yards away, torn between fear for themselves and concern for Emma. "It's okay," Emma called to them, her voice hoarse. "He won't hurt anyone. This is Kodiak." Kodiak, echoed Lisa. Your bear from the sanctuary? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. He recognized me, after all these years. For nearly an hour they remained there on the shore. Emma seated on the sand, Kodiak lying beside her, his massive head resting in her lap like he used to do years ago. She stroked his fur, examining him closely. He had a few new scars, testament to the challenges of wildlife, but his coat was healthy, his body strong. He had thrived in freedom. You've done well for yourself, she murmured, finding a patch of grey fur around his muzzle that hadn't been there before. Becoming a proper wild bear. Gradually, her colleagues' fear subsided. They watched in wonder as Emma interacted with the massive predator as comfortably as if he were a pet dog. This is unbelievable, whispered Sarah, cautiously taking photos with her phone. No one will ever believe this. Finally, Kodiak slowly raised his head, as if sensing it was time to leave. He stood, towering over Emma, then gently nuzzled her face one last time. Then he slowly turned and unhurriedly walked back toward the forest. At the edge of the woods, he turned around, just like 5 years ago. Their gazes met across the space once more. Thank you, Emma mouthed silently. The bear blinked, as if in response, and disappeared among the trees. Emma sat motionless, staring at the place where he had vanished, tears flowing freely. The enormity of what had just happened washed over her in waves. Kodiak had not only survived in the wild, he had remembered her, and when she needed him most, he had come to her rescue. Her colleagues approached cautiously, still stunned by what they had witnessed. Emma, Sarah said gently, what just happened? It's a miracle. I know, she replied, not taking her eyes off the forest. I always knew he was special. That night, around the campfire, Emma told them everything, the full story of Kodiak, their bond, their painful separation. The words poured out of her like a dam breaking, years of suppressed grief and love finally finding release. He saved your life, Lisa said, still in disbelief. He recognized you after 5 years and saved your life. Bears have excellent memories, Emma explained, but this was more than that. What Cody and I had, it was something beyond explanation. In the darkness beyond their fire, something moved in the trees. Emma smiled, knowing he was still there, watching over them. After that incident, Emma Miller's life changed dramatically. She resigned from her office job and returned to working with wildlife. She founded a small rehabilitation center for injured bears, purchasing part of the former sanctuary's territory. The Kodiak Wildlife Rehabilitation Center started modestly, just Emma and 2 volunteers working out of a renovated cabin, but word spread quickly about the bear whisperer who had an uncanny connection with the animals in her care. Research universities sent students to study her methods. Conservation organizations provided grants. Within 3 years, the center had expanded to include state-of-the-art medical facilities and spacious enclosures designed to prepare injured bears for return to the wild. Emma rarely told the story of the bear who saved her from drowning. It was too personal, too incredible, but her colleagues, who had witnessed the miracle, confirmed every word. He recognized you after so many years, skeptics would ask. That's impossible. For an ordinary bear, yes, Emma would smile, but Kodiak was always special. Her work gained national attention when National Geographic featured the center in a documentary. The film crew captured remarkable footage of Emma working with injured bears. Her gentle approach, the trust she established, the remarkable results she achieved. What's your secret? The interviewer asked her. Emma thought of Kodiak, his intelligence, his gentleness despite his power, the bond they had shared. Respect, she answered simply. These animals aren't just beasts. They're beings with feelings, memories, personalities. When you recognize that, everything changes. The documentary brought donations and volunteers flooding in. Emma expanded the center again, adding educational programs for school children and training courses for wildlife officials. Through it all, she never stopped looking for Kodiak. Trail cameras throughout the surrounding wilderness captured images of many bears, but none with the distinctive crescent scar. "Maybe he's moved on to another territory," suggested her assistant Mark, seeing her disappointment after another fruitless search. "Maybe," Emma would nod, but in her heart she knew differently. Sometimes, on particularly quiet summer evenings, she would sit on the porch of her new home at the forest's edge and listen. It seemed to her that among the rustling leaves and creaking branches she could hear heavy footsteps, as if something large and powerful was circling, guarding her peace. 3 years after the river incident, on a snowy December morning, Emma found massive bear tracks leading to her porch. On the railing sat a honeycomb, dripping golden sweetness onto the freshly fallen snow. She smiled through tears, touching the sticky offering with trembling fingers. "I remember too, Cody," she whispered to the silent forest. "I remember too." The Kodiak Center continues its work to this day. Each year, dozens of injured bears receive treatment and return to the wild. Emma Miller has become a leading authority on bear behavior and rehabilitation, and if visitors sometimes glimpse an unusually large brown bear watching the center from the tree line, a bear that never approaches but never truly leaves, the staff just smile knowingly. Some bonds transcend time, space, and even the divide between species. Some connections are eternal. He remembered, and I do too. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.